Welcome to the Jennifer J. Hammond Podcast. Jennifer is a licensed realtor, educator, speaker, and best-selling author. Jennifer's goal is to help you find your yay in every day.
And let's talk about that. That's one to dig in a little bit deeper as well, is that so often I think that people, they don't understand how valuable it is to create a relationship with a bank, a lender, whoever it is that you decide you want to help finance multifamily. It's really important that you actually have a relationship with them. And it's not just someone where you're looking for, oh, I'm just looking for the best interest rate or the best, I think people get in that habit from residential real estate where they've bought a home and then they've refinanced and then they're shopping around for the best rate, or they're not, again, it's like, what do they say? What's that old saying? Stepping over dollars to pick up a penny.
Yeah.
And I'm like, ouch. It's so important to have that relationship, especially when things go wrong. So will you talk a little bit about the importance of it, but then also how do you create it so that they love you?
That's a great question. That is a great question. So I have a misconception about relationships, especially because I learned that too. A lot of people were like, hey, Victor, in the beginning, especially, was like, you need to build relationships. So my concept of a relationship is through business. So I never have really bought into the concept of let's go do dinner, let's go, out for coffee, let's get to know each other. And for me, because I've always been, now I've moved to the capital side of raising capital and things like that.
Yeah.
But I've always been an operator. So I'm like, my conversation was always like, why do we need to go to dinner for you to make a decision? It goes right back to like just my not understanding of the business at the time, but that served me. Because I found that a lot of people who were professional, they were busy. When we're talking about building a relationship, they actually respected that more. So I finally got it in my head that it was about what the relationship was built off of. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I built the relationship off of speed.
Yep.
And that became the relationship. So, as people talk about, and my alarm's going off, I need to turn it off, but so I'm bringing that conversation, tightening it up in a bow now. So building what you build a relationship on with the lender with the bank, with your private investors, with the owner, seller, people on your team is probably more important than the relationship itself. So like if for me, what I had to start being very clear on with everyone was like, hey, our relationship will not be built off of you and I going to lunch and hanging out. Well, do that. That's how you build a relationship in your business. But even with our bankers, it was like, all right, you don't really want a relationship with me. What you want is confidence in me to know that I'm a good borrower. This is a good loan, and we're going to be able to stay in this deal for 10 years. Right.
And I think that that's actually a really good and amazing difference that I think is so important is how are you defining relationship? Is it that you're going out to dinner and lunch and that kind of stuff? Or is it that you're actually giving them the exact documents? And so again, like I said, about asking what is needed and wanted by this particular lender. And I do want to talk to you a little bit about capital raise. Do you want to grab that alarm real quick?
Please.
And then, and I'll continue. I think it's really important, no matter what we're doing, that we always have a relationship that is the appropriate one for that situation. And with banks, a lot of times it isn't so much that you just need to go out to dinner or lunch or that kind of stuff, as much as it is, you need to find out what they need and what they want and what is going to bring their confidence level up so that next time you ask for money, again, they say yes faster. They definitely already have confidence in it, but you have to, the other part about it that you hit on that I think is so often overlooked as well, is you also need to keep showing up with your best, not like, oh, now I got a great relationship, I don't have to work at this. And I think, you could take the relationship like in a marriage or any other relationship where you've been in a relationship for a long time and they're like, doesn't matter if we have date night. It doesn't matter if I, tell them how much I admire them or that I love them or any of that stuff. You need to remember that it's a new unit at a time. It's a new day. It's a new deal. And with your lenders, you need to find out what is needed and wanted to create a relationship that actually is the one that they want. There's actually a saying I love, says, just because someone loves you, doesn't, I always say, someone loves you, doesn't love you, doesn't show you love the way you want to be shown love, doesn't mean that they don't love you with all their heart. And on a personal level, when I think about that, the way that we show love, the way that we create a relationship, made me think about that when you said that, is that, when I said a relationship, one of the biggest things, what I also talk about a lot, is that sometimes people are like, okay, I just want to check the boxes. So I'm just looking to check the boxes. And then I want whoever has got the best interest rate. I don't want to know about you. I don't know about your bank. And yet the thing is if they're going to be interested in you and giving you money, you have to be interested enough in who is this bank and who are the people that I'm going to be working with, because they're people. It might be an institution, but there's real people there. And so often when people are also, especially like you and I talked about going fast, sometimes you can forget and you don't realize how important it is that we make sure that we are actually communicating with a person and not just thinking, oh, this bank is going to give me millions of dollars and it's an institution. There's still people there.
Right. No one wants to lose their job.
Right.
So, and what you just said, and I've always listened to this. My uncle actually told me when me and my wife were dating, like almost 20 years ago now. But I was like, oh yeah, she's the one, right? Before she knew she was the one. And he was laughing and he was like, well, what you do to get her is what you have to do to keep her.
Yeah.
That's always stuck with me, like business wise, because just similar to what you said, like just because a bank lends to you today or their rates, like every time I show up, whether it's, bank, a lender, a private lender, whatever, I show up just like it's our first date. I show up ready. I show up, smelling good, looking good, on time, asking questions. I talk a lot because my brain's clicking really fast. So I throw up on people. And I do that I did that when I met my wife too. I just randomly just went off. I felt bad. I was like, she's probably, as well as other meetings I go to with bankers. I used to think that was a weakness on my side, not a strength, that I overtalk sometimes, but I found that's actually helped me. One, because I meet a lot of people who are, bankers and been on a day where they didn't want to talk. They're not in the business of talking. They're in the business of listening, and who better to listen to than someone who won't shut up. Right. So
but also I think the nice part about it is, like you said, when you're working with lenders, it's really important to make sure you're giving them what they need and what they want, not what you might have a preconceived notion or what you had from the last deal. Because guess what? Everything changes. Even if it's the same bank you've been working with or same lender, everything changes, and their needs and their wants, their documentation, their expectations, all of that is super important with multifamily investing. It's really, really important to understand that and to know that. So I want to switch over a little bit. You talked about with multifamily, you've used an institution, a bank, for a long time and you're in California, right?
Yeah, we're in California now. Yeah.
Yeah. But let's talk a little bit about, you talk about raising capital, raising money now. So what are the things that you do to attract somebody to come and invest and be your money person?
Wow, that's a great question. Because it's changed.
Yeah.
So before it was a lot of, calling people and talking to people, speaking to groups, or asking other people like, hey, who do you know that's looking to invest or whatever, right? But a lot of people have a lot of their own information now. So it goes right back to, and I'll lean on this all the time. Like a lot of time it goes to certainty, what it is you're looking at and how certain are you in it? Because typically, and I'm only now understanding this, maybe about 2 years in it, like being a real estate investor and someone who raises capital for the purpose of investing, those are two different activities and almost two separate businesses. Yep. And if you don't separate the two,
oh yeah,
the excitement about your deal can actually be overpowering to their money, right? So to answer your question, like that's been the big shift for me, was to start hanging around quite a bit more with capital raisers, people who raise capital for a living. The world's different.
The world is definitely different. I mean, it's even like what I said earlier. It's always continuing to communicate and ask what are their needs and wants. And it's funny because I'm gonna use license, especially since your wife is a licensed real estate agent, and since I'm a licensed real estate agent, DC, Maryland, and Virginia, but also because I'm a real estate investor, I see things so differently. And I remember I can recall when we first had, as we call it, the public facing websites, the Zillows, the Redfins, all those kind of things, when they started popping up, I remember there were some people who said, oh, well, you're no longer going to need a real estate agent. And I was like, really? That's an interesting thing. So if you go to court, you don't need a lawyer because you have online, legal Zoom. Is that the way it goes? Like, I thought, wow, that's such an interesting viewpoint to think that you don't need it. And I think that with raising capital now, there's so much more information out there. However, if you don't know how to take that information and interpret it for yourself or for that specific deal, people get the wrong information all the time. I love when people say, oh, I just looked at Zillow and the Zestimate on my house is blah, blah, blah. And you're just like, yeah, well, that's not in this year. That's not today. That might be 5 years from now, but that certainly is not. And part of it is because it's an algorithm. It's just a mathematical formula that they're putting together stuff, and they're not really analyzing. Did you have the same addition as your other couple neighbors, or is yours an older house? Did you do the renovations? There's all sorts of things that can impact the value. And the same thing when you're raising money for multifamily is you need to find out, okay, so, like some of the questions, and you might, if you can share some that you might ask for people, if they want to invest, how long do they want their money tied up? Can they remove their money, or do they have to, keep it in for 5 years, 10 years? What can they expect? A monthly income, or were they going to get paid twice a year? Some things like that. So what are some of the other questions that you ask when you're raising capital for multifamily?
Well, typically for me, I just make an offer because I deal with accredited investors.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So define that for everybody who's in the room who doesn't understand. What's an accredited investor?
So accredited investor is basically somebody who had their income is $200,000 a year. That was last year. They know they're going to make it again this year. There's some consistency in their income and their higher income. So it's $200,000 as an individual, $300,000 for a combined household income, or they have $1 million net worth, not including their personal residence. So through stocks, bonds, other investments that they have through real estate, what have you. That's what the SEC and all the different people, the powers that be, have this made up arbitrary number that this says that you're able to make your own investment. So really what it says is that if you make an investment, you won't lose, and that investment is not successful, you won't lose other things. Right. That's really what that boils down to.
You're not going to lose your personal home and lose your
you won't be on the street. But it doesn't, this is just my opinion. I always tell people this. It doesn't make anyone less better or less smart because they're not, because you can make $199,999.99 and be considered non-accredited, but it doesn't make you not great at what you do. It doesn't make you stupid, but they just said that, hey, without these requirements, you're not intelligent enough to make your own decisions, which it's made up. That's my opinion. But that said, it does. Okay, so I used to, I reference this as why I deal with the capital raising side the way that I do. So I used to also operate a gym, right, a coaching facility for athletes. And at some point, all I did was go to wrestling clubs, MMA schools, and the military special forces for guys who are getting in special forces. That was the requirement to get in. Are you a competing athlete? No? Okay, good. Well, then what we're doing is probably not for you. So because of that structure in my, side projects, it makes it a lot easier when I'm dealing with capital raising, because I don't have this line in the sand where it's not easy. Some people are like, well, they'll make a way. And for me, I'm like, hey, are you an accredited investor? Basically, are you a competing athlete in the money world? No. Okay. Well, what I'm doing is not for you. Later, when I have this other thing going on where I do a 506B, and we've talked, I can allow you to kind of take a look at what we're doing. But for now, this one won't be for you, but I'll keep you in mind. So that's probably the main question. And then naturally, like you said, it's like, they ask questions. I had someone ask me yesterday, they were like, how'd you come up with 15%, internal rate of return, or how long is the money going to be there? But typically I've already told them that. I'm like, hey, it's 7 to 10 years on the hold, 15% internal rate of return. You get 6% pref on the deals. And it's a minimum investment of 100,000, but the average person is probably going to do 250 to 300 because of the size of the deal. Because it's a fund, it's not just this, it's a syndication, but typically we're going to have 2 deals in one fund. So the ask is a lot different, because instead of me asking them, I'm actually giving them the information and allowing them to kind of pull and plug the things that they have questions about. So it goes right back, and I hate to go back to this, but it's true. Now it goes back to speed, because when I'm informing somebody, they get to pull the data. It's no different from when we talked about a communication. If I communicated all channels, then you get to pull the channel that makes sense for you. And then I can go down the right line of communication and or the right answer or form of answer for you specifically. Because if I ramble on about what Victor likes, which I do, I need to, then you may miss the thing and hold on to the one thing and leave, with that one question or something, but I won't know what that is, because I may ask questions and you may not want to answer me. I found, and I think that was through trial and error, in the beginning of raising money, my segue into raising real money, not like, 50 grand, 100 grand from like one person in hopes to make it, was, I had to go raise a couple $100,000 for $300,000 for a deal I had to close in like 30 days. So like that experience pushed me to not do the conventional relationship building thing. I didn't have time to build a relationship with you. So it was like, do you have this, and do you want to be a part of this? And it was like, I need more information. Got it. And I just pushed on. I was like, okay, I'll send it, and moved on, because I didn't have time to wait. During that time, because I had a broker who was an owner that was giving me an opportunity on a deal, I learned a lot. One, that was like unheard of, right? At the time, from an educational standpoint, when somebody tells you, hey, go do a deal, you're going to take, 45 days for due diligence and 45 days to close. And that was non-existent in a competing market, with somebody doing you a solid, like a favor, like, hey, I give you this deal. It's $3 million. I'm not going to do a contract with you, but you have this time to complete it. And it was like an opportunity. So that one opportunity, and I was going to get sidetracked, but that one opportunity actually set the stage for what I'm doing now, because it became my method of operation. So to answer your question, I don't really ask a lot of questions. I give a lot of information and receive questions. That way I can answer intelligently. So again, it goes right back to the relationship building. Like, how do you want to build a relationship? I think for a while there, anybody who's learned to raise capital, and I say learn to raise capital, not had to, right? Because there's two types of bits of information in there. If you learn to raise capital, then that's what you're taught, because that's what I learned first. But under pressure, that lesson doesn't work. It didn't work for me. I didn't have the connections. I had to go make them, and it was almost like speed dating. So I think from that perspective, what you're saying, so as naturally as somebody says, if I had to ask questions, it was like, how much money do you have access to today? If you saw the deal, you loved the deal, you liked it, like, how much would you be able to invest, comfortably?
And how fast can you invest? Because sometimes people have money, but it's tied up and they're not going to be able to get it out fast.
And at some point they just want, they're like, hey, we just want to meet and get to know you. Awesome. What do you want to know about me? And some people don't like that. I'll be honest, but and that's okay. But it goes right back to, me meeting the right person, because again, we talk about any deal that's you're going to be involved with anyone for 7 years. I know like people who don't even have the same clothes that they've had 7 years ago.
Yeah.
So, meeting somebody, you go, hey, I really like that person. They were quick. They were to the point. They said everything I needed to hear, and then some. I think that person is going to get the job done. And they were very adamant about they were going to do it. And I think probably more important than that, as we relate to asking questions, is going right back to the thing about, when we're looking at anything like the deal itself, ourselves, it's the people who I just kind of, hey, fine, I get it. It's totally not for you right now, but I'll definitely keep you updated on what's happening. It was always going back to them and say, hey, the deal did work. Here's where we were. The people that did get on, this is what they received.
Yeah.
Man, I appreciate you taking time with me. I know I was kind of like blazing hot at the moment, but probably when I come the next time, I'll be blazing hot again. That's just how I operate. You don't have to go fast. That's the whole point. That's why I raise money. So, I don't get a lot of people who do want to go fast like I do.
Well, I think it's important, like I said, you're asking the needs and wants of those people to make sure. So I know that I can't believe how fast an hour flies by.
Yeah.
But I wanted to go ahead. All the people, we have a great audience. If any of you would like to ask questions of Victor, feel free to raise your hands now, and we'll go ahead and I'll pull you guys up and we'll start answering questions. And of course, my last question to you, of course, is the future for multifamily real estate investing. But let's go ahead. Let's start with John Lee. John, do you have any questions for Victor about multifamily?
Yes, thank you, Jennifer. And I do want to thank you for bringing such experts that you always feature on your show. This has been really good. Thank you, Victor, for all these insights. My questions are pretty brief here. I've never ventured out past the 2 or 4 family as far as multifamilies go. It sounds like you're into quite a few more units than that. And I just wondered if that's kind of like what your experience is with longevity of the tenant stay and the percentages, and especially when you take over another building. I've had fairly good success taking over properties with tenants already in it, but that does take a certain skill, and it sounds like you have it. Could you just maybe talk a little bit about that? Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John.
Victor, did you hear that okay?
I did. If you could repeat it for me, that would be great. I heard it and it came in, but I definitely want to be clear because I want to definitely answer the question correctly.
So he was asking about, he's always been a small, a couple units, not going over 4 units. And so he was asking about some of the differences between going into the bigger units, into, 50, 100, bigger buildings. And then also the longevity of how do you keep your tenants? One of those secrets, and we kind of started talking about that earlier, and then we got a little sidetracked, but how do you keep them?
Honestly, I really take care of them, and it goes right back to, the speed because speed also has to do with response time. So if someone has an issue or a question or anything like that, it's always, hey, I'm always available. You can always reach the office. If you have a question, we'll get to it quickly. If you need something done, we'll make it a priority. It's all a priority. That's how we've really been able to keep people. We've had people that left our units, went someplace else, and come back when the unit's open. They're like, similar to what he's saying, when you take over a property and you retain a tenant and then something happens, they move or something like that, they come back, they're like, wow, we didn't know we were getting such a great service until we left.
Yeah.
Because people, like you said, like if you take over a property and you get a good person, and or you may be getting what you thought was a bad person from an old owner, and you get there and you clean up a mess. You go, hey, I understand you had problems here. We'll make sure you don't experience the same thing. What's going on? You address it. They want to be heard. And you go, cool, I will make sure to note that, and I'll make sure you don't have to deal with that, and go from there. So then you can start this new, relationship with this person based on activities. That's how we've always retained. I'll be honest with you, I've taken over properties like, seller finance, apartment buildings, small stuff, 14 unit things that tenants were there not paying.
Yeah.
Like, this person doesn't pay, the whole take it over, blah, 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 right? Where people are concerned about collecting past rent from an old owner. I would go in and just waive it. I'm like, hey, look, you know what? Here's the deal. The past 2 months rent that you did not pay, because I know I'm not going to be able to get it, right? I've already paid it.
Right.
I'm like, hey, I'm going to, and I'm not advising everybody to do this. I'm just saying it's a strategy based on the question. I'm going to waive that. I'm going to write a note saying that it was owed as a promissory note, and I'm going to write on here that it's a forgiven note. I'm going to file it. You get here. Can you begin to pay on time from the first on forward? Right.
Right.
And they're like, oh, so there's this big weight lifted. I found that. I'm not saying to do that all the time. Other people are like hating against it. I got that. But then the question is this: let's say they paid, $1,000 a month, whatever. If they move, you're going to pay that anyways. You already have a ready-made tenant. Probably there's some things going on in their unit. They're usually extremely excited about that. They don't want to be displaced. Maybe there was a discrepancy that had nothing to whatever, right? Yeah. I'm like, hey, if you're starting with me, you're starting with me clean slate. I don't want to drag the past into your future. I've been able to do better with people that way than I was ever able to do it any other way where I don't do that.
Yeah.
So, but again, that came from my beginning lessons of learning. Like I didn't have money to get in, so I kind of didn't want them to leave. I'm like, all right, I gotta like,
Right.
I'm like, please stay and pay like after this, right?
Right.
No, or I have to. So to answer, and that goes definitely for the smaller stuff. You can get in and do that. So I'm not saying to do that. I'm just saying that when you asked the question, it was like when you're taking over, you either have a good tenant or you don't. But I just assume everybody is a good tenant. People go through whatever they need to until they prove to me otherwise. And I'll just make sure to kind of what I've always said. I will do what I said, even to a fault. Like if I say I'm gonna get you out, I will get you out. So
yeah, I think that's the most important part is just, again, finding out what is needed, wanted from those tenants and making sure that you give it to them. And then when you have happy tenants, obviously they will pay. And like you said, sometimes you don't know. The other thing you said is you don't know what you got until it's gone. That's the old saying. And so sometimes people leave, but then they'll come back because they're like, wow, we had no idea you were such a great landlord, because they didn't know better until they get that. The other thing that John asked you really quick, and I know we're running out of time, but I wanted to make sure you answered is because this is a very common question, is going from small to big. Do you think it's better to be in more units or less?
Bigger, absolutely.
Yeah,
Bigger.
I'd say bigger is always better.
So, as of late, that's been something I've been saying really, or maybe I would say over the last 4 years. It matters because I don't have enough. Like the only reason why certain things get under my skin, or even one of the deals that we have now, it's like our last single family property that we're selling. We were having some issues, and I was frustrated for like 30 seconds, and I was like, this only matters because I didn't have like 100 of those things.
Yeah, I was going to say there's definitely, and we could go do a whole hour just on the differences between, that's how I started off with a single family. When you have one person and they don't pay, then 100% of your income is gone. If you have, 10 units and only one person is not paying, that's 10% of your income. So it definitely, that's just one example of why I think bigger is better in a lot of ways. But anyway, before we run out of time, I want to make sure we answer anybody else. Feel free to raise your hand if you have questions. David Randolph, he's somebody who specializes in working in short sales. So David, do you have a question for our wonderful, amazing Victor Bell?
Yes, I do. And I apologize, Jennifer, for coming in late. I was both on vacation and it's a 3-day holiday weekend, so I apologize for coming in late. You may have covered this, but my question real quickly is, I'm in real estate and I've made a lot of money in single family. I have almost $3 million in my IRA that I lend out. Do you, when you're raising private money, take money from IRA, people who have IRA accounts? Do you utilize that when you're raising funding?
Yes, we do. Typically, it would be through a self-directed IRA. So somebody that has an IRA, probably like what you do already, you would have your self-directed IRA, and then you can have, yourself and your custodian kind of set it up to where you can lend it out. So yes, I do, but I don't handle that part. I usually have people set that up, or they'll make an introduction. I have a few people that people can go through and have went through. So yes, I do though. So, and I think that's, that's probably going to be more prominent because there's people, it's not new, probably like for yourself, you've made a lot of money and you have, you have a very good understanding of how that works. But now that that's become a little bit more prominent, to other people as they're coming up and like, hey, we have this money, it's there. So yes, I do. And I would assume that that's probably going to be the way most people are going to be doing it over the next probably 10 to 15 years, as a matter of fact. Everybody wants to be responsible for their own investment opportunities. So through their IRAs is probably going to be the best way, one of the best ways.
Yep. Thanks, David. So I want to say, Victor, we're just about out of time, but I did want to ask you that final question is, what do you see for the future? Now we've gone in, like you talked about, we've been through so many different interesting markets, and now we're in a really interesting COVID-19. And why I say COVID-19 market, because it's impacted, we had this, eviction moratorium, and then we've had the mortgage moratorium, and we've had all sorts of things that are definitely impacting real estate investing, and specifically multifamily, rents. And I'm just curious, what do you see, if you have your little crystal ball, how do you see the future for multifamily?
Yeah, it's funny. Anybody that, has a crystal ball, sees the future their way, right? So
Right.
I believe multifamily, like I think multifamily as an investment period, as an investment vehicle, that's going to be the number one vehicle for a really long time. It's the most easily understandable for anybody from single family to segue into. There'll always be commercial players and things like that as well, but I think that's where it's headed. So, you want my honest opinion? I'm in San Diego, and it's not because I'm biased. I did this on purpose, but I believe San Diego is going to be the next Miami in the next 10 years. I really do. Because of all the different market cycles I've seen, I've always watched California money move all the way across. And then as that money has been made, it gets retracted back to its source and then recycled back to those markets every couple of, 10 years, 20 years. New York, same thing. That money comes down from the East Coast and trickles down into Florida, then pushes all the way back. So it's always made. Everybody gets the benefit of that. But I think multifamily is going to be the primary for that this time coming around. Naturally an office usually lags as a segment of the market. So many people go to offices, but with COVID and all the things that's happened, people are working remote. So I think office combination between multifamily, meaning you can work from your home and or business center and office inside of the apartment communities that people own. Even the small ones are going to be required now to blow out a unit and either put a couple of treadmills in it. So if you buy a 12 unit, just assume that 2 of your units are going to be small business now and a small gym. Like you're going to have to make these adjustments for you to compete if you're going to get into that. Now, that said, it's going to cut into income. So a lot of people in the small multifamily side, whether you're naturally once you get past the 5 units, you're in commercial. This is my opinion, my crystal ball. If someone is not syndicating and or doesn't have a fund over the next 10 to 20 years, they will not be able to compete in the multifamily market. The values are going to be too high. Yeah, I really believe that. We're not talking based on real estate now. We're talking based on rentals. And I think rents are going to continue to climb because people are willing to accept paying it. Yeah. Not because of the rent where they live, but for what the rent buys them also with the amenities that are offered and some of the stuff that even smaller, 40, 50 unit apartment buildings are providing now that they didn't used to provide before. Right. Just it's turning into an amenity acquisition as opposed to an actual real estate acquisition anymore. Now you're buying a pool, community, a gym, clubhouse when you're looking at anything,
Yeah, we're seeing that trend for sure around the DC area as well. Well, anyway, I am so grateful. Thank you so much for being with us today. And as you know, I'm going to ask everybody in Clubhouse, you guys who are on the stage, except for you, Victor, because you're where you are, stay where you are. But David and John and